When I parked on level B2 under the Fifth Avenue branch, my dashboard clock read 7:58, and my phone fired two notifications before the engine finished shutting down. The first one was from our operating account, outgoing transfers restricted. The second came from the bank's business console. Northline Property Management LLC, signer update request, provisional. The second line mattered more than the first. If it had said approved, I would have been starting from damage control. Provisional meant someone had pushed the request into a continuity lane, and the legal chain had not closed yet. I took screenshots immediately, named them E1_0001 and E1_0002, copied both into my read-only archive folder, and recorded a quick hash value in my notes. People think that kind of discipline is theatrical when the conflict is personal. It is not. In audits, the earliest record usually carries the highest evidentiary weight because nobody had time to curate it. If my first reaction looked cold, it was because panic does not preserve metadata. By 8:11, I had a paper ticket from the self-service kiosk and a 19-minute wait in front of me. The lobby television was running local political coverage with bright graphics and no useful information. I kept my eyes on my own checklist: submitter identity, claimed authority, review state, temporary privileges, and manual override trace. Every question outside that list was noise. At 8:29, I sat down with Erin, the relationship manager on the business desk. She confirmed my identity, my relationship to my father, and the account profile. I placed my documents in chronological order before she asked for them. My ID, my father's hospital admission notice, Northline's last annual report, and the old signature card copy from our property file. She asked what I was requesting. I gave her the narrow version. I was not asking to release funds. I was not asking for beneficiary allocation. I was asking for a procedural fact pattern: who submitted the signer update request, under what claimed authority, what status the request had reached, and what temporary privileges had been granted before legal review completed. Erin glanced at her monitor and shifted into controlled language. Submitter name, Linda Chin. Packet label, emergency continuity packet. State, legal review pending. Trigger condition, primary controller hospitalized. Temporary channel, active with category limits and a daily ceiling of $25,000 for essential operating items. Her tone said she had repeated this script before. The script itself said the institution knew the request had risk. I asked for summary pages, not full attachments. She printed 3 pages and slid them over. Page 1 was an intake record listing the packet components: a 2018 limited power of attorney, a hospital administrative communication authorization copy, and a draft board consent sheet marked for legal verification. Page 2 was a risk control note. It mentioned a manual override tag in the workflow and indicated dual internal checkpoints: branch operations and regional legal on-call. Page 3 was from the trust portal. It did not say beneficiary amendment executed. It said proposed beneficiary amendment notice filed. Yet my status had already moved from primary beneficiary to pending verification. That is how institutional drift works in real life. No single sentence says your position is gone. A series of temporary states quietly changes who can act while everyone says final review is still pending. I read the scope language on the 2018 limited POA line twice. Tax filings, rent collection, maintenance disbursement. No trust amendment authority. No permanent manager replacement authority. No beneficiary order authority. The hospital authorization category was narrower still, strictly tied to billing and administrative communication with care providers. Standing alone, each instrument looked ordinary. Combined as if they formed one chain, they produced a power no single instrument granted. I wrote 3 notes in the margin of page 1: scope mismatch, cross-domain assembly, preserve override trace. Erin noticed and asked if I was counsel. I told her I was not a lawyer, I was a healthcare data compliance analyst. She gave the smallest nod and said she understood I knew where her disclosure limits at. I told her that was exactly why I only asked for process markers, not private narrative. I asked whether she could disclose the names behind the manual override. She could not. She could confirm the role levels and the existence of employee IDs and timestamps for each checkpoint. Then she said something that moved from polite to useful. If I intended to challenge scope, my attorney should send a preservation letter fast, because system logs could roll into normal archival cycles. I entered a new action in my incident register before I left her desk. Send litigation hold notice within 48 hours to branch operations, regional legal risk, and enterprise records retention. At 8:57, I scanned the 3 pages into PDF/A and assigned file names that preserve timestamp context. I do not keep contested evidence only in a phone camera roll. Every item needs original image, OCR text, hash note, and source description. That procedure has saved me from "you altered the screenshot" arguments more than once. Outside the branch, rain had started in thin diagonal lines. Seattle rain does not perform. It just keeps time. I sat in my car and called our insurance broker at 9:13. She confirmed 2 points. First, our property policy renewal window closed in 5 days. Second, if manager authority entered dispute, the carrier could require joint issuance or interim safeguards before accepting payments. Linda was not wrong that continuity risk existed. She was wrong if she claimed continuity risk automatically authorized trust or control chain changes. People who cut corners prefer that sentence to stay blurred. Pressure is real, therefore anything done under pressure must be reasonable. Compliance work is mostly refusing that jump. At 9:42, I logged into the King County Records portal. Trust instruments were not fully public, but filing events were. I found 2 entries tied to our family file. One was notice of proposed amendment. The other was temporary administrative representation. The first was explicitly non-final. The second used language that sounded legitimate while avoiding recognized authority classes. I downloaded both, tagged them E1_public_0007 and E1_public_0008, and mapped each to the same question: who used which title to gain which operational lane before formal adjudication. At 10:06, my mother texted me, "Come home for lunch. Linda is here. We need to talk clearly." I answered, "Okay." I did not ask why Linda was convening anything in my father's house while he was still in ICU. The answer was already in the paperwork. The more useful move was to treat lunch as a factual capture window, not an emotional hearing. Before driving home, I stopped at Staples and bought a rigid document box, tab labels, and archival sleeves. Every tab had 5 fields: source, timestamp, holder, claimed purpose, scope limit. In hospital audits, the fastest route to failure is mixing fact material with interpretation material in one folder. I was not going to do that to myself. I got home at 11:58. My father was still in intensive care, but the dining table was set like a board session. My mother sat at the end, nearest the kitchen. Aunt Linda sat across from the window, with a folder already open. Cousin Kai was next to her with a tablet and a cash flow dashboard on screen. On top of their folder was a cover page titled Family Stability Package V3. Kai stood up before I took off my coat. "This is a risk alignment meeting, not a fight," he said. That sentence sounded polished enough for an investor call. It also tried to establish jurisdiction by tone alone. I put my phone on the table, opened the recorder, and stated the boundary in plain language. I was recording factual statements for legal review. No public distribution. Anyone objecting could do so now. No one objected. Silence can mean many things, but it means one useful thing in process terms. The chance to object was offered. Linda pushed the packet toward me. I know you're under pressure. We are doing continuity work, not replacing anyone. Your father is hospitalized. Rent, maintenance, payroll, and insurance do not pause because we are worried about wording." I opened to the authority page. The same 3 elements sat there again: limited POA, hospital communication authorization, proposed amendment notice. She had arranged them side by side like puzzle pieces that formed one complete mandate. "I read all 3 this morning," I said. "The limited POA does not include trust beneficiary sequence changes or permanent manager substitution. The hospital document is administrative communication only. The proposed amendment is not an executed amendment. You are combining non-overlapping scopes into an action scope. None of the documents grants. Kai rotated his tablet toward me. If we miss payroll this week, people don't get paid. If maintenance tickets age out, tenants escalate. If renewal lapses, lender notices can follow. You work in compliance. You know operational continuity is not optional. Yes, I said. Continuity is not optional. Scope discipline is also not optional. We can create an interim mechanism with restricted categories, dual acknowledgement, and judicial monitoring. We do not need to reorder beneficiary positions to pay insurance invoices. My mother looked between us and pressed her thumb against the edge of a water glass. I signed one hospital form because the nurse station said they needed a communication contact. I thought it was calls and billing. I did not sign anything to start a lawsuit. The sentence was both true and incomplete. Fear of litigation is understandable. Fear does not expand authority classes. I kept my voice level and asked only factual questions. What was the document title? Hospital Administrative Communication Authorization. Did it contain durable financial POA, trust amendment, or manager replacement language?
No.
Did you separately sign written authority granting Linda power over trust or company control decisions?
No.
Those three answers mattered more than any accusation. They drew a bright line between administrative contact and asset control. Linda folded her hands. You are turning this family into a deposition room. No, I said. I'm doing scope confirmation. If you want to keep handling insurer calls and hospital billing communication, fine. Any action touching trust sequence, ownership position, or management control chain now needs formal legal path and independent review. Kai leaned forward. Court timelines are slow. By the time you get an order, damage could already happen. Then we ask for temporary supervised operations, I said. Not temporary concentration of control. Different tools for different risks. He switched tabs and showed me a spreadsheet named continuity_pressure_model, XLSX. The front page projected 5-day obligations, payroll, insurer remittance, emergency plumbing, municipal compliance fee. Some line items looked authentic. One line item did not. Strategic Consulting Reserve Transfer, $62,000. I tapped that row. Why is this here under emergency continuity? Kai shrugged. Consulting support during transition. Transition to what? I asked. He did not answer directly. Linda jumped in. You are auditing family members like vendors. When family members submit authority packets across systems, I said, systems still evaluate them as submitters, not relatives. Linda took a new page from the folder and slid it toward me. The title read Temporary Coordination and Non-Disruption Letter. The core clause said that before hearing date, I would not raise disputes with banks, insurers, courts, or regulators without family consensus. Sign this so we avoid external noise, she said. No one is asking you to surrender rights. We are asking for order. The clause was styled as order and functioned as waiver. I returned it to her. I won't sign this. If we need order, we can agree on an interim payment protocol with narrow categories and full logs. I will not sign a standstill that blocks legal remedies while provisional states keep shifting in background. For the first time, Kai stopped performing calm and looked tired. You realize lenders and tenants do not care about your legal theory if operations fail. They also do not care about our family narratives if authority is challenged and signatures are reversed later, I said. You can reduce risk by staying in scope. My mother asked if we could pause and eat before everything got worse. No one touched the food. The room had the exact shape of a negotiation in which everyone wanted legitimacy and no one wanted review. I took photos of each packet page corner, footer, and revision mark. Not because I expected those pages to disappear, but because disputed documents often reappear with tiny differences. Footer date, page count, signature block order. If I had a record of version v3 today, v4 could not quietly claim to be original tomorrow. Before leaving, I told my mother one thing directly. You are spouse level in medical context. Your signature should not be used to narrate powers you never granted. If you want to avoid court, that's your choice. But avoidance is not authority. She did not argue. She said she would visit my father again in the evening. At 12:41, I stepped outside with the packet photos, audio file, and 12 new log entries. I sat in my car and typed a short event summary while details were still crisp. Event block 11:58 to 12:41. Participants: Mother, Linda, Kaimi. Evidence captured: packet photos, audio, transcript pending, explicit statements on scope. Immediate risk: attempted standstill execution before adjudication. Immediate countermeasure: decline execution, preserve versions, prepare counsel review. I did not write what I felt. I wrote what could be tested. Driving to Harborview, I replayed one line in my head: "You are auditing family members like vendors." She meant it as insult. I heard it as confirmation that family language was being used to bypass vendor-level controls that every institution applies to strangers. That distinction matters. Systems fail when known relationships are treated as exemptions. At a red light on Spring Street, I called our payroll provider and asked a technical question instead of a dramatic one. In a manager-authority dispute, could they process a restricted run tied to existing employee roster and historical compensation bands only? The representative said yes, with manual review for outlier amounts. She emailed the policy excerpt while I waited through the next light cycle. That call punctured another false binary. We were not trapped between total lock and total surrender. There was a third option built into the system: narrow continuity with guardrails. Anyone refusing that option was refusing safety, not pursuing it. By the time I pulled into hospital parking, I had the first draft of an interim protocol in my notes. 1. Permit only payroll, insurance, tax remittance, and legally required maintenance. 2. Freeze consulting transfers, capital outflows, and beneficiary-related disbursements. 3. Require dual acknowledgement on each payment item, spouse-level confirmation plus independent legal monitor. 4. Deliver daily payment log to bank legal risk team. 5. Archive all instruction origins and approval timestamps. That protocol would not settle inheritance or trust sequence. It would do something more urgent: stop scope inflation from disguising itself as emergency competence. At 13:22, I walked into Harborview's privacy office with a folder in one hand and a single goal in mind: do not ask for what I am not entitled to ask for. People lose credibility fast when they enter a regulated process and demand exceptions for personal pain.
I was not going to spend mine that way.
The intake specialist introduced herself as Carla and asked how she could help. I said I needed to file requests related to possible scope misuse involving patient-linked communications and parallel financial actions. She asked whether I was the designated personal representative under HIPAA. I said no. She asked whether I had court orders. I said not yet. She nodded and moved to the right form stack immediately. Boundaries came first. As an adult daughter, I did not have automatic access to full clinical records, sedation notes, or capacity assessments. Those records required either direct patient authorization, spouse-level representative path where applicable, or judicial process. That was expected. The important part was what she said next. While I could not extract full charts, I could request an accounting of disclosures and submit a formal preservation notice for logs tied to specific timestamps and interactions. That distinction gave me a legal foothold without pretending I had rights I did not. I filed 3 requests. First, accounting of disclosures, covering my father's admission period through present date, requesting recipient entity, disclosure purpose, authorization basis, and timestamp. Second, preservation request, naming a 96-hour window around hospitalization and packet submission, requesting retention of communication routing logs, identity verification checkpoints, and portal hierarchy update traces. Third, counsel notice of anticipated civil review, stating that relevant metadata might be sought through subpoena and asking suspension of non-essential automated log pruning. Carla reviewed each line, corrected one date format, and stamped all 3 with intake numbers. She said response windows were usually 7 to 10 business days, unless legal expedited review applied. I asked one more narrow question. Could the communication hierarchy for a patient be updated by someone holding only administrative communication authorization? She said policy required scope check and supervisory sign-off, and any dispute marker could pause execution until clarified. She could not discuss my father's specific Q state at that desk. That was fair. Process-level answers were enough for now. Outside the office, I photographed the stamped receipts, logged their intake numbers, and sent a short update to Priya Shah's assistant. Subject: filed HIPAA-compliant requests without overreach. Body: 3 items submitted. Seeking disclosure accounting plus log preservation, not chart extraction. Intake IDs attached. Potential hierarchy update risk identified. At 14:37, the assistant acknowledged receipt and scheduled a 10:30 meeting the next morning with Priya. She added a document checklist. Bank summaries. Insurance renewal clauses. Family packet version photos. Historic authority documents. Any messages suggesting pre-hearing restriction attempts. Checklist culture has its own kind of mercy. It turns chaos into tasks. I drove back to my office at 15:18, badge scanned into an empty conference room, and opened a fresh workbook called Authority_Matrix_V1. On the vertical axis, I listed actions: medical communication, billing submission, routine operations payment, manager replacement, trust amendment, beneficiary sequence change, and digital account recovery. On the horizontal axis, I listed authority sources: hospital admin authorization, limited POA, durable financial POA, trust instrument, corporate operating agreement, and court order. Then I marked each intersection: allowed, not allowed, or court-dependent. The pattern looked exactly like I expected and still made my stomach tighten. Every action already attempted in our situation sat in not allowed or court-dependent when mapped against the authorities actually cited in Linda's packet. At 16:06, I added a second sheet titled Procedural Risk Deltas. Column A captured the action attempted. Column B captured claimed urgency rationale. Column C captured lawful narrow alternative. Column D captured litigation exposure if scope challenge succeeded. Example row. Action attempted. Beneficiary status shifted to pending verification pre-adjudication. Claimed urgency. Continuity and creditor protection. Lawful narrow alternative. Freeze discretionary transfers. Maintain essential payments under supervised protocol. Exposure. Reversal risk. Fiduciary breach claims. Evidentiary sanctions if records altered. At 16:39, I pulled Northline's public filings from Washington's business registry. The current structure was member-managed LLC. My father was the sole member on file. Operational delegation could exist for limited tasks, but structural manager replacement required formal member action or valid legal substitute path. Linda appeared in historic records as finance contact, not manager. That single contrast mattered. Contact routing authority is not governance authority. I cross-referenced that with an old internal email my father sent 2 years earlier under the subject line delegation boundaries. His message was short and blunt. Linda could coordinate rent collection and maintenance disbursement, CPA handled tax submissions, and any trust or control chain changes required him plus counsel. The email was not a substitute for legal documents. It was still useful evidence of long-standing expected boundaries inside the organization. At 17:03, I called the payroll vendor again and requested their written contingency policy. They sent a PDF confirming restricted run options under authority dispute conditions. Payment categories could remain active while extraordinary items were held for review. Another false binary collapsed. By 17:11, I converted my notes into a one-page proposal titled Interim Continuity Protocol, Narrow Scope. I sent it to Priya, copied bank legal risk, and copied my mother. Protocol summary. Allow payroll, insurance, tax remittance, and required safety maintenance. Freeze consulting transfers, capital expenditures, ownership-linked disbursements. Required dual acknowledgement per instruction. Spouse confirmation plus independent legal monitor. Produce daily machine-readable payment logs to legal risk queue. Preserve source instruction metadata for every transaction. I wrote a separate 2-line message to my mother. This keeps operations running and keeps authority boundaries intact. She replied at 17:19 with a screenshot of a text thread from last year. My father's message read, medical decisions, spouse first. Business and trust, no changes without lawyer. I saved the screenshot, extracted metadata, and asked her to preserve the original device without chat cleanup. Screenshots persuade people. Source devices persuade courts. At 17:23, Priya replied with one sentence. This establishes expected scope and a safer alternative path. Keep submitting records, not conclusions. That became my rule for the evening. At 18:03, my mother called from the hospital. She said my father had a short lucid window, but could not sustain complete sentences. She asked whether I could avoid escalating too fast. I told her I had not posted anything publicly, not contacted tenants, and not made performative accusations. Every action I had taken fell into 3 categories: preserve, verify, limit. She said I sounded like I was managing a compliance incident. I told her that was exactly what this was. At 19:18, the bank sent an automated notice confirming temporary payment lane activation for approved continuity submitter. I replied within 6 minutes asking for one additional control. Dual acknowledgement required before execution on each instruction, spouse or court-appointed monitor confirmation attached. Would they approve it immediately? I did not know. But once the request entered a traceable queue, ignoring it became a choice that left a record. At 20:02, Kai sent an e-sign link named Family Standstill Addendum V4. I did not open the signing page. First, I captured message headers, relay chain, and domain details. The signature platform was not his usual outside counsel's domain. It was a low-cost white-label signing host. Maybe harmless, maybe not. Either way, it became E1_digital_0021. At 2019, Linda texted, "This is not personal. We are trying to keep your father's business alive." I answered, "Then keep it alive inside scope. Preserve all uploads, drafts, and communication logs from May 1st onward. This is a formal preservation request." I avoided threats and adjectives. Preservation language has enough force on its own. At 21:07, I opened the tax portal recovery flow viewer for my father's account without attempting unauthorized entry. A warning banner appeared. Recovery email change attempt detected. Previous night at 23:14. Source summary contained 6 characters that changed the entire map. AZ West. My father had been in a monitored ICU bed in Seattle. I captured screen state, interface version string, browser time zone, and local timestamp. Time zone ambiguity ruins arguments faster than most people realize. At 21:21, I sent Priya a short note. Potential unauthorized access vector, location mismatch, request subpoena target timestamps and source region logs. Her reply came 2 minutes later. Good. Next move is legal process for release. Keep chain of custody clean. At 21:46, I merged all entries into episode 1_master_log. 26 items, grouped by bank actions, family statements, medical system process, and digital account signals. Each line used the same 3-part format: fact, evidence, next action. I left emotion out, not because I felt none, but because feelings are poor identifiers in contested systems. At 22:03, my mother sent me a photo from my father's room. The frame held a monitor edge, a blanket fold, and his left hand. No ring. I logged it as context only, non-determinative, pending corroboration. In compliance language, uncertain data is not discarded, just quarantined from conclusions. At 22:17 a.m., new hospital portal notice arrived. Communication hierarchy update submitted for patient Goen Chin, submitter Linda Chin, status pending supervisor verification. That was not a dramatic threat message. It was more dangerous than a threat because it sat inside legitimate process rails. If approved, it would alter who received updates first and who could claim urgency status earliest. I filed an immediate scope objection through the portal, attaching my mother's document title statement and requesting review of whether administrative communication authorization could support hierarchy priority change. I asked for pause pending scope confirmation. At 22:49, Priya sent a 4-point prep note for morning call. Challenge bank scope first. Parallel hospital disclosure accounting. Avoid direct trust merits contest in round 1, and seek court-supported limited continuity to neutralize operations pressure argument. I replied with 2 words. Facts first. At 23:06, I wrote a personal restraint list and pinned it to the top of my notes app. Do not discuss in family group chat. Do not post on social media. Do not label any act as forgery before forensic confirmation. Do not infer clinical capacity from partial observations. Do not attempt unauthorized logins under any circumstances. Most people think discipline applies only to the other side. In real disputes, it applies first to whoever wants to survive judicial scrutiny. At 23:31, legal risk acknowledged my control request with a standard sentence. Concern noted. Routed for review. Not a victory, but not a dead end either. It created a traceable queue reference, LR 77431. I logged it and set a follow-up timer for 8:15. At 23:44, I replayed the lunch recording and transcribed only verifiable statements. Tone markers, interruptions, eye rolls, and emotional spikes stayed out. The transcript captured exactly what mattered. Linda confirmed she submitted a packet combining limited POA, hospital administrative communication authorization, and proposed amendment notice. Kai confirmed continuity urgency argument based on payroll, maintenance, and insurance timeline. Mother confirmed she signed administrative communication form only and did not sign trust or manager replacement authority. Linda offered standstill language limiting external remedy channels before hearing. I declined standstill and offered narrow continuity protocol. In procedural terms, that transcript converted an afternoon of family pressure into an ordered set of admissions and positions. At 0:12, Kai sent another message. If payroll fails, staff and tenants will hold you responsible. I did not respond. Responsibility transfer pressure is one of the oldest tactics in governance disputes. The correct response is not emotional defense. It is an alternative control design that keeps lawful operations alive while blocking scope inflation. So, I built a payment whitelist draft with machine-checkable fields. Category code, payee legal name, tax ID match status, historical baseline amount, variance threshold, supporting document hash, approval pair IDs, execution timestamp. If they truly wanted continuity, they could adopt this in one day. At 0:37, fatigue finally landed. Not because anyone had shouted. Because every system was now contested at once. Bank workflow, hospital communication hierarchy, tax recovery channel, and company document permissions. A scope error in one system becomes leverage in another. Cross-system drift is where ordinary families lose control without ever hearing the word theft. At 0:51, I wrote the countdown on my whiteboard. 20 days, 8 hours. Under it, I drew 3 columns. Must secure. Login location logs. Manual override trace. Communication hierarchy pause confirmation. Packet version history. Must challenge. Scope assembly logic. Premature status downgrade effects. Standstill coercion framing. Must not do. Public accusations. Unauthorized system access. Speculative clinical claims. It was not motivational. It was operational. At 1:09, the tax portal security team replied. They would not release full logs voluntarily. They would process a legal request if we supplied target timestamps and suspected source region. I immediately drafted the legal request skeleton for Priya's team. Target window, admission time through plus 72 hours. Indicators, recovery email change attempt alert, source summary AZ West, mismatch with patient physical location. Requested artifacts, authentication challenge logs, recovery workflow events, source infrastructure region, device fingerprint hashes, and associated ticket IDs. At 1:26, I packed next day materials in strict order. Bank summaries, lunch transcript, packet photos, hospital receipts, insurance clause extract, authority matrix, interim continuity protocol, and digital alert captures. I wrote one line on the folder cover. Not who is right, who is scope. At 1:44, my mother messaged that she could send the nurse name and timestamp from the day she signed the hospital form. I asked her to provide facts only, no interpretation. She sent, May 2nd, 1420, Nurse M. Turner, Patient Services, Desk B. That gave me a cross-system anchor point. At 2:03, I inserted the anchor into my timeline and generated a conflict sequence view. 1420 spouse signs hospital admin communication authorization. 1627 business continuity lane receives manual override checkpoint completion. 2314 tax account recovery email change attempt flagged from AZ West. Next morning proposed beneficiary amendment notice enters filing stream. Close spacing does not prove intent by itself. It does establish a pattern worth formal scrutiny. At 2:27, I saved episode 1_master_log with 31 entries and ended day 1. I did not sleep long. At 7:12 the next morning, an email from our company document platform hit my inbox. Shared folder access policy updated. External collaborator rights had moved from view only to comment and download. Approver ID, K. Chen. That change told me the contest was no longer only about signatures. It was about narrative possession. Whoever controlled downloadable copies could edit context before each version reached council. At 7:40, I joined a call with Priya from my kitchen table. She started with execution feedback, 2 high-value moves yesterday, decline, standstill, and convert every event into verifiable entries. Then she gave one directive for day 2. Obtain the login location chain. Not assumptions, not broad claims, specific logs tied to timestamp and region. I asked what to do if the bank maintained strict privacy refusal. She said we did not need total disclosure at once. We needed judicial acknowledgement that a live authority dispute with continuing risk existed. Once that threshold was crossed, targeted logs would follow. At 8:02, I submitted the supplemental fields to tax security exactly as requested. Target timestamps, suspected region, account reference, event type, and legal representative contact. Submission reference SR 29A 770-4 appeared on screen. I logged it, but did not mark task complete. Submission is not resolution. At 8:19, legal risk confirmed receipt of my preservation notice and requested counsel-signed formal letter within 24 hours. I forwarded it to Priya. She returned a signed template titled Preservation and Scope Objection. I inserted case references and sent it to all listed recipients, then captured sent mail metadata and recipient resolution snapshots. At 8:37, Hospital Patient Services supervisor called back. Communication hierarchy update was paused pending scope clarification and spouse confirmation path review. That one pause removed immediate leverage from the wrong channel. At 9:05, I sat in my parked car outside the office and allowed myself exactly 20 seconds of stillness. Not relief, calibration. Episode 1 was never supposed to deliver final victory. It was supposed to convert uncontrolled drift into controlled scrutiny. At 9:17, the tax security team sent a secure message. Preliminary review confirms unusual recovery attempt associated with AZ West infrastructure. Formal log release requires legal process. I created a new card, E2_start_0001, login location. That was the handoff point into the next movement of the story. But before moving forward, I had one more obligation. I needed to document, in plain language and machine-friendly structure, what exactly had happened in the first 48 hours so no one could retroactively rewrite sequence. I opened a new appendix file and titled it Incident Register, Human Readable Narrative Extract. Entry 001. 758. 2 alerts indicate transfer restrictions and provisional signer update. Source: Mobile banking app screenshots E1_0001/E1_0002. Action: preserve originals and hashes. Entry 002. 829. Relationship manager confirms continuity packet submitter Linda Chen and pending legal review. Source: in-person statement plus printed summary pages. Action: capture packet component list. Entry 003. 834. Packet components include limited POA, Hospital Administrative Communication Authorization, Draft Board Consent. Source: Page 1 Print Summary. Action: Scope Comparison. Entry 004. 836. Manual override marker appears in internal workflow note. Source: Page 2 Summary. Action: Preserve override chain and timestamps. Entry 005. 838. Trust portal status shows proposed amendment filed and beneficiary status changed to pending verification before final adjudication. Source: Page 3 Summary. Action: Challenge premature effect. Entry 006. 913. Insurance broker confirms renewal deadline and dispute-sensitive handling options. Source: Call notes and policy excerpt email. Action: Design lawful narrow continuity alternative. Entry 007. 942. County records show non-final filing language. Source: Public portal downloads E1_public_0007/E1_public_0008. Action: Map filing status to authority claims. Entry 008. 1158 to 1241. Family meeting admissions captured. Source: Audio recording and transcript. Action: Preserve standstill offer and rejection. Entry 009. 1322. HIPAA boundary confirmed. Full chart access denied without proper path. Source: Privacy Office intake discussion. Action: Pursue disclosure accounting and log preservation instead. Entry 010. 1331. 3 requests filed and stamped. Source: Receipts E1_MED_0011 to E1_MED_0013. Action: Follow response windows. Entry 011. 1612. Authority matrix built, showing attempted actions exceed cited instrument scopes. Source: Workbook authority_matrix_V1. Action: Share with counsel. Entry 012. 1711. Interim continuity protocol drafted and circulated. Source: Protocol PDF and outgoing email logs. Action: Request adoption. Entry 013. 1918. Temporary payment lane activation notice arrives. Source: Bank email. Action: Request dual acknowledgement control. Entry 014. 2002. Standstill addendum link received from non-primary signature domain. Source: Email header capture. Action: Preserve domain and relay chain. Entry 015. 2107. Tax recovery email change attempt flagged with AZ West source summary. Source: Portal capture with UI version and time zone. Action: Request legal release path. Entry 016. 2217. Hospital communication hierarchy update submitted by Linda and paused after objection. Source: Portal notices and supervisor call summary. Action: Monitor status until resolved. Entry 017. 144. Spouse provides nurse and timestamp for administrative authorization signing event. Source: Direct message and preserved thread metadata. Action: Reconcile against disclosure logs. Entry 018. 712 Day 2. Company file sharing permissions expanded by K.Chen. Source: Platform policy update email. Action: Preserve file access policy changes and review downloads. Entry 019. 917 Day 2. Tax security preliminary confirmation of unusual AZ West recovery attempt. Source: Secure message. Action: Move into subpoena preparation. When I finished typing that appendix, I realized it read like the first honest map of our family in years. Not the emotional map we used at holidays. A systems map: channels, privileges, assumptions, and the points where trust failed quietly before anyone named it. By 9:42, I had moved from reaction mode into evidence architecture mode. Priya asked for one thing before noon: a clean chain that connected each attempted action to a specific claimed authority and a specific institutional gate. Not a story about betrayal. A matrix a judge could scan in 3 minutes. I built what she called the gate table. Gate A. Bank signer update intake. Claimed authority. Limited POA plus hospital administrative authorization plus draft board consent. Observed status. Provisional, legal review pending. Risk. Temporary permissions active before adjudication. Requested remedy. Preserve full approval trace and freeze non-essential instructions. Gate B. Trust portal proposed amendment filing. Claimed authority. Emergency continuity rationale. Observed status. Proposal filed, non-final. Risk. Practical status downgrade effect despite non-final state. Requested remedy. Enjoin practical effects until authority validated. Gate C. Hospital communication hierarchy update. Claimed authority. Administrative communication authorization. Observed status. Pending then paused after scope objection. Risk. Priority routing influence without confirmed representative scope. Requested remedy. Maintain pause pending legal clarification. Gate D. Tax account recovery workflow. Claimed authority. Unknown actor. Observed status. Recovery email change attempt flagged from AZ West. Risk. Account takeover vector intersects with financial control actions. Requested remedy. Subpoena event logs and identity proof chain. Gate E. Company document sharing permission expansion. Claimed authority. Internal admin action by Kade Chen. Observed status. Rights changed from view to comment/download. Risk. Narrative and version control drift before council review. Requested remedy. Preserve access logs and immutable snapshots. At 10:08, I sent the gate table to Priya and Daniel Ortiz, the forensic accountant she had brought in for limited review. Daniel's first reply came 5 minutes later. If we could tie the same endpoint region or device fingerprint to both recovery attempts and packet drafting events, the case would move from suspicious timing to linked activity pattern. He asked for raw header exports, not forwarded screenshots. I went back through everything and exported message headers from 3 channels: standstill addendum email, continuity lane notices, and platform permission updates. I also exported portal capture metadata where available. Then I built a cross-reference index. Artifact ID, source system, UTC offset, local capture time, sender domain, routing path, related gate, and hash. At 10:30, we met on video. Priya kept camera off and voice on. Daniel joined with a shared screen and walked through how courts usually read mixed technical evidence in family governance disputes. Do not overstate, he said. Courts trust conservative analysts. If you say this proves everything, you lose credibility. If you say this proves exactly what it proves and no more, you gain room. Priya added the legal spine. Round 1 is not final judgment. Round 1 is injunctive posture. We are asking for immediate boundary controls while authority is tested. Keep your language there. She assigned tasks in sequence. Task 1. Finalize preservation letter package and service proof. Task 2. Compile narrow continuity proposal with attachments proving feasibility. Task 3. Draft declaration describing observed events only. Task 4. Prepare hearing exhibit list with clean numbering. Task 5. Request targeted logs through legal channels, not broad phishing requests. I asked the question that had been sitting in my throat all morning. If we challenged too early, could no contest style language be used against me in trust context? Priya answered without softening. That is why we are not opening with a merits attack on distribution clauses. We are opening with scope misuse and procedural overreach in operational channels. Different lane. In my notebook, I wrote one line: first protect process, then litigate allocation. At 11:12, Daniel sent a template for a technical affidavit appendix. It included sections most non-technical counsel forgets to request. Device and endpoint uncertainty statement, time zone normalization method, screen capture provenance, limits of interpretation, known unknowns list. I filled it in carefully. In known unknowns, I listed exactly what we could not assert yet. We did not know the human operator behind AZ West events. We did not know whether credential compromise or delegated access was used. We did not know whether draft board consent was edited after initial upload. Listing unknowns felt counterintuitive in a fight. It is one of the strongest forms of credibility available. At 11:48, I received a second automated bank notice showing one payment had been queued in the temporary lane. Municipal Property Safety Inspection Fee. Category matched essential operations. Amount was within historical range. This was useful because it proved limited continuity could function without broader authority transfer. I logged it as supportive evidence for our narrow protocol argument. At 12:05, my mother texted from the hospital waiting area. She had spoken briefly to a patient services staff member and confirmed the hierarchy change was still paused. She asked if she should sign anything new if Linda presented revised forms. I told her no signatures until counsel reviewed title, scope paragraph, and cross-reference clauses. She replied with one word: understood. At 12:27, Aunt Linda sent a longer message than usual. She said she was disappointed I was treating every action as hostile, that she had carried family financial burdens for years, and that I was risking payroll and reputation by forcing legal routes. I read it twice, archived it, and did not answer immediately. When I did answer, I used 7 lines. I acknowledge renewal and payroll pressure are real. I do not acknowledge scope expansion without valid authority. Essential operations can continue under narrow controls. Please confirm preservation of all uploads and drafts. Please do not request signatures outside verified scope. Any urgent payment can be routed through proposed protocol. Counsel contacts are attached. No accusations. No insults. Just parameters. At 13:04, Kai sent a screenshot claiming 2 maintenance vendors might suspend service without direct approval authority. I called both vendors directly using numbers from prior invoices, not from his screenshot. One said no suspension notice had been issued. The other said they needed payment confirmation, not a control chain rewrite. I documented both calls. By 13:42, I had enough to draft a short statement titled "Continuity is possible without scope drift." I attached vendor confirmations, payroll policy extract, and the restricted payment lane proof. Priya said we might use it as hearing support if opposing counsel continued framing the issue as binary collapse. At 14:10, Daniel asked for one more forensic angle, whether the standstill addendum revisions correlated with domain changes and timestamp patterns that suggested rapid template cycling. I exported v3 and v4 artifacts, compared metadata, and noted that version labels changed while core waiver clause remained functionally identical. Cosmetic revision. Substantive continuity. Another familiar pattern. At 14:56, we prepared my declaration draft. Priya insisted each paragraph begin with either "I observed," "I received," or "I filed." No speculative verbs. No psychological conclusions. Paragraph 3. I observed 2 notifications at 7:58 on May 4th indicating transfer restriction and provisional signer update request. Paragraph 7. I received 3 summary pages from branch personnel listing packet components and workflow markers. Paragraph 12. I filed 3 requests at Harborview Privacy Office and received stamped intake IDs. Paragraph 18. I received a portal alert indicating recovery email change attempt associated with AZ West infrastructure. Paragraph 23. I received a communication hierarchy update alert and filed an immediate scope objection. By 15:22, the declaration looked plain, almost dull. Priya said dull was good. Courts trust dull documents. At 15:40, we shifted to exhibit packaging. I created an index with immutable references. Exhibit A1. Mobile alert captures E1_0001/E1_0002. Exhibit A2. Bank summary pages with intake and risk notes. Exhibit A3. County filing records E1_public_0007/0008. Exhibit A4. Family meeting transcript excerpt with admissions. Exhibit A5. Hospital intake receipts E1_MED_0011-0013. Exhibit A6, Authority Matrix and Gate Table. Exhibit A7, Interim Continuity Protocol. Exhibit A8, Bank Lane Activation and Control Request Correspondence. Exhibit A9, Standstill Addendum Headers and Domain Records. Exhibit A10, Tax Portal AZ West Alert Capture. Exhibit A11, Hospital Hierarchy Pause Notice and Call Summary. Exhibit A12, Vendor Confirmation Notes and Payroll Contingency Extract. At 16:03 Priya warned me about one probable counterattack. Opposing counsel might claim I was weaponizing technical language to obstruct urgent care for my father. We prepared an answer rooted in documentation. I had not blocked medical decisions, had not interfered with treatment, and had explicitly supported spouse-centered medical communication while challenging unrelated financial scope expansion. At 16:30, another secure message from Tax Security arrived. They requested legal documentation packet number before processing log release review. Priya filed the request immediately and copied me the confirmation. The process had moved from passive notice to active legal intake. At 16:58, my mother's name appeared on my phone again. She sounded steadier than yesterday. She said Linda had asked if she would sign a revised coordination letter at the hospital cafeteria. My mother declined and said all paperwork should go through counsel now. I did not praise her. I just logged the event and asked whether she still had the message thread.
She said yes.
At 17:20, Daniel delivered a short technical memo that clarified why AZ West mattered, without exaggeration. It did not prove identity. It did not prove intent. It did establish a location mismatch requiring explanation. It did increase probability that account recovery activity was not initiated from patient's physical location. It did justify targeted log disclosure request. I attached his memo to our packet as expert preliminary note, not final forensic conclusion. At 17:44, Legal Risk finally answered my dual acknowledgement control request. They did not accept full implementation yet, but they enabled an interim flag requiring enhanced review for non-routine categories and instructed continuity submitter to provide supporting documentation for each instruction. Partial progress is still progress when gates are tightening. At 18:06, I received one more packet from Linda's side, this time titled Interim Family Cooperation Draft. It removed the explicit line forbidding external remedies, but inserted softer language that still nudged toward pre-hearing silence. I forwarded it to Priya untouched. She replied in under 4 minutes. Substance still problematic. Do not sign. At 18:25, I sat in the hospital parking lot and wrote the plainest summary I could manage. Day 1 objective was to stop uncontrolled drift. Day 2 objective is to stabilize gates and force traceability. Both objectives are partially achieved. Critical unresolved issue remains login location identity chain. At 18:47, my father had another short lucid interval. I was allowed in for a few minutes with nurse supervision. He did not have the strength for full conversation. He squeezed my hand when I said, "We are keeping medical decisions and money decisions in separate lanes." He blinked once, slowly. I did not ask legal questions. I did not ask him to confirm documents. I did not risk contaminating anything he might later need to state clearly. When I left the room, I wrote one line in my private note, not in the legal log. Boundaries can be a form of care. At 19:15, Priya sent a draft motion outline for emergency relief hearing prep. The requested orders were narrow and practical. Maintain status quo on trust beneficiary effects pending scope review. Require preserved production of override and submission logs. Restrict temporary payment lane to essential categories under enhanced review. Prohibit destruction or alteration of related electronic records. Maintain hospital communication hierarchy pause until representative scope resolved. No dramatic asks. No overreach. At 19:46, Daniel asked whether we had baseline signatures for comparison in case consent sheet authenticity became disputed. I pulled 3 older documents with my father's known signature patterns and one with Linda's witness initials from a prior maintenance authorization. I logged all as potential comparison set, pending forensic route decisions. At 2012, I opened the company Cloud Console and exported an admin activity report for the previous 72 hours. The report showed permission edits, link shares, and policy toggles tied to user IDs. I did not interpret yet. I preserved first. At 2033, I received confirmation from payroll vendor that restricted run processing could proceed with dual document support even if governance dispute remained open. That became Exhibit A13 draft. At 2057, my phone vibrated with a message I had been waiting for and dreading in equal measure. Tax Security had accepted legal intake and assigned a disclosure review case number. No logs released yet, but the request was now in the correct queue with legal authority attached. I wrote the case number on the whiteboard under Must Secure and circled it twice. At 2118, I reviewed my own language in every outgoing message from the last 36 hours. I removed one phrase that sounded too close to conclusion, replaced it with narrower wording. Precision is not just about being right. It is about staying admissible. At 2142, Priya sent a short note before ending day 2 work. You're doing this the right way.
Keep the frame.
This is a scope and process case before it is anything else. I closed my laptop at 2203 and copied the day's additions into episode 1_master_log supplement. Total entries now 49. Entry 035, gate table completed and delivered to counsel and forensic consultant. Entry 038, legal strategy confirmed, process first lane adopted. Entry 041, spouse declined revised signing attempt at hospital. Entry 044, partial enhanced review controls activated in bank lane. Entry 047, tax security legal intake accepted, case number signed. Entry 049, unresolved critical issue remains operator identity behind AZ West recovery attempt. At 2231, I looked at the board one last time. The hearing was still 20 days away, but the map had changed. On day 1, they operated through ambiguity. On day 2, every move had a gate, a timestamp, and a record. That was enough for episode 1. The next objective was no longer defensive. It was directional. Trace the login location to a person, a device path, and a submitted action chain. At 2244, I created the first card for that objective and pinned it to the top of the project tracker. E2_start_0001. Question: who initiated AZ West recovery events? Required artifacts, source infrastructure logs, challenge flow records, linked account actions, device fingerprints, associated legal submissions. Dependency: active legal disclosure queue. I saved the file, set the follow-up alarms, and turned off the screen. The room went quiet. The systems did not.